Welcome to Merrily End. My name is Mark Machado. I'm joined as always by Nick Brookes, who joined us from Jamaica, and my cousin Dominic Machado, who joins us from America. Before we carry on, just a reminder, if you haven't done so already, please sign up for our newsletter. It comes out once a week. Do loads of great writing in there from Nick and Dom, and occasionally I do a mediocre piece about various aspects of Sri Lankan cricket. We're heading towards quite an exciting summer for Sri Lanka. We've got the World Cup in a few weeks, and then there'll be the LPL, the premier franchise tournament in the world, taking place in Sri Lanka. And then after that, the Test side is in England for 3 Test matches, and the glory, all the glorious summer of Test cricket in England to come. So I'm excited about that. Subscribe to our newsletter because we'll be talking about that as we get closer to all those events and through those events. And it's all free and it comes straight into your inbox as soon as it's released. And you can read about it. And then if you really like it, you can share it with your other friends who just have any sort of interest in Sri Lanka and or cricket. We're not fast. Anyway, lots going on in Sri Lankan cricket. It's been a kind of reasonably big week. The top headline story as we record this on a Monday, which is a bank holiday in the UK, and I'm not sure it's a bank holiday anywhere else, is that the women's team have qualified for the World Cup in Bangladesh, a T20 World Cup in Bangladesh. They qualified yesterday. It was slightly nervous, but they got us over the line. And actually looking back on it, Dom, there was never really any worries, was there?
I have to admit, I was a little worried in that second innings when Oza was batting. She was batting like a dream. And I thought, oh gosh, is this going to be that one innings that takes away the dream that these women have been working for the past few years? But in the end, they were rightly rewarded for all the hard work, all the good play that they've had over the last 2 years. And they put together a really strong tournament, even without sort of big contributions from Chamri, except on the bowling side. She's contributed a lot on the bowling side. A lot of players have stepped up. We're seeing a lot of talent come through, and we see players playing with a lot of confidence these days. Now, the big question for me is they go to the final of this qualifying tournament. The final means absolutely nothing. Both teams playing in the final have qualified, but it may mean which group the Sri Lankan women are in. And there's, at the moment, one group of death going on right now. So I think it's India, Australia, and New Zealand are the 3 teams that are in there, and Sri Lanka joined them. And so that's a murderer's row there. It's going to be a very, very tough group to get out of. So I kind of hope that they maybe take the chance to play some younger players in the finals. Gimhani has been bowling great. Why not give her another shot? Chamri's been playing a lot. Why not give her a little bit of a rest and maybe see if they can find themselves in another group? I know Estelle is headed to Bangladesh to cover the World Cup and really hopes that Sri Lanka end up with India, Australia, and New Zealand, so she gets to cover all those exciting games. But I'm a little bit more conservative in my outlook. But overall, a great set of wins for the women, really professional set of wins, and a great way to sort of end this run of exceptional play and hopefully springboard it to the Asia Cup that comes on later this summer and then to Bangladesh in the fall.
Nick, you are the kind of premier historian of Sri Lankan cricket after your book in Ireland's 11 stormed the cricketing book charts and awards. Is there any sort of history in Sri Lanka of I don't want to say throwing, that's not the right word, but fielding weaker sides or fielding less experienced sides, should we say, in games such as a final that could mean which side of the draw you get an easier run in the draw at all? Is there any precedent for this? Or is the Sri Lankan way to actually play our strongest 11 and try and get the win?
I can't think of any precedent, Marky. I don't know if you guys have got anything in the old brain locker, but I mean, it's pretty rare that there's been a situation like this, right, where it's a final and both teams qualify and you know what groups you're going to get into. I think that the Sri Lankan way is kind of we fear no man or woman and play our best team, go out, play hard, and end up in the group that we end up in. And if it's Australia, India, and New Zealand, we take them on. I was thinking about this morning, and it's early to start some internal Muralian beef, but it reminds me of the NBA playoffs where all the teams were tanking to
Oh,
avoid Dom's Philly 76ers, and my team, the Knicks, said we'll take that second seed, we'll take them on, and we took them out. So, yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know what the right
fresh wounds, fresh wounds.
I don't know what the right thing is to do here. I can definitely see the argument that it could be a good time to rest and rotate. And if you end up losing the game, it isn't the end of the world. But I do think that these wins, even if it's only subliminally, build confidence. And so, yeah, I'm pretty on the fence on this one.
I think that you're right to identify Sri Lanka should fear no man or woman. I think that's been the kind of ethos that has gotten us to this far in Sri Lanka's kind of cricketing odyssey. And I think actually it is definitely the tougher group because I think the two teams that you want to avoid are probably India and Australia. I mean, New Zealand are a great team, but in recent history, this Sri Lankan women's side have beaten them in Asian conditions. I think Bangladesh always throws up odd results whenever they host tournaments or whenever teams come and play them. Sri Lankan women have a bit of history in the last few years of getting to an Asian Cup final in Bangladesh. And of
Mhm.
course, we lost to India in the final, but that's what Sri Lanka teams do, regardless of the gender. We lose to India. So I kind of don't think really this is, all they've got to do is if they get there, that they should be able to beat New Zealand. They've just got to pick up a win against Australia or India, which I mean it's harder said than done, right? But if you're going to win the tournament, you're going to have to play the
Yeah.
best teams at some point, and maybe it's better to try and play them earlier. Though I mean, you could argue that you're going to end up playing one of those two teams twice if you go deep into
Mhm.
the tournament. So I think that for me, I think a lot of sports about momentum, and actually, if we can, win against Scotland in the final, and if we can get into that group of death, let's come with all the momentum we've got. Also, professional sport is about being professional, and part of that is trying to push yourself and play against the best players, which
Um,
people like Charmery will be desperate to do as
yeah.
well, right? So we've got to kind of respect that, and I think it's only right and proper that we look to win that final
Mhm.
and get through. And actually, I suppose it's just channels like us that want to kind of even create a debate around whether or not
Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
do. Though of course, me and Nick are well versed in the Premier League and in European football. It's quite normal for teams to be tactical about which sides they play when. They could argue that they have much more games, so they do have to have squad rotation
Mm.
in them. Go on, Dom.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think one thing that's interesting is that I think whatever group we end up in, we are definitely going to be a feared team. They know that they're one sort of masterful Chomri innings away from having their World Cup completely shaken up, right? And we know that we have a good, solid team. Shout out to Vishmi Gunaratne, who is, I think she's the second leading scorer of the entire tournament. She's outscored Chomri. She's really come into her own, and that's really good to see ahead of the World Cup. And she reminds me, and I was sharing this on our WhatsApp, a little bit of Patham Nisanka, technically correct, a lot of good shots, and just needs that confidence to expand and express herself. And she showed some of that. She had a 73 not out against Uganda with some shots behind the wicket, and seeing that skill level develop is a really, really heartening thing for Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I mean, so last year was about the kind of re-emergence of the Sri Lankan women's side, and this year is about not just the dominance of Charmery, but also actually the younger the seedlings around her are starting
Mm.
to sprout very thick green leaves, and shoots are coming through that actually it sounds like we might be closer to the end of Charmery's career than we all think, and actually she's leaving it in pretty good shape because there are people around her who are starting to make runs and pick up wickets, and I, if you look at that team now and think this is just a one woman side, then
Yeah.
you are mistaken, and
Mm.
you're not doing enough research, which is good to see, and Rishmi broke all sorts of records as a 14-year-old. I think she score like 200 runs or something in a T20 innings when she was about
Yeah.
14. So 200 odd runs, which is obviously crazy. So hopefully, she'll be reproducing that at the World Cup come Bangladesh, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
that should be what we expect as Sri Lanka fans. I'm kidding, of course. Let's move on now. If we had sponsors, this is where we'd have to break. Just if anyone's watching and wants to sponsor the episode. Let's move on now and talk about the T20, the men's T20 World Cup squad. We were going to do this episode that you're watching now, at the kind of back end of last week, because we kind of assumed that, like everyone else, Sri Lanka Cricket would put their squad out at the back end of last week, which is when they were meant to put it out. But Sri Lanka being Sri Lanka, they decided not to, and instead there's 25 men currently playing a kind of a T20 select tournament, a kind of warm-up tournament, and which we're kind of led to believe that if they do, the people who kind of really put their hands up could end up in the squad. There's so much to talk about in this. I think firstly, let's start with, how do we feel about Sri Lanka Cricket not putting their squad out when everyone else has? I'll offer up my opinion first before I come to you, Nick. I think it's fine on the assumption that there's no kind of punishment coming through from the ICC. Then I think it's all right. I mean, last week there were suggestions that they were going to send 25 names to, which is just a totally weird suggestion. And I don't really know why they thought they'd be allowed to do that. But the fact they haven't done it doesn't really bother me that much. I think it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of a slight kind of power play, though I suspect other than Sri Lanka fans, no one else cares. Especially because I think our team is kind of reasonably predictable. And there's some kind of definites in the squad. So I'm not really sure why they've done it. But Nick, how do you feel about this approach taken by our leaders?
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem in and of itself. I'm always baffled ahead of test matches when teams release their team 24 hours ahead of the game instead of at the toss. And I just think, why would you do that and give the opposition extra time to plan and strategize? So I don't have a problem with them leaving it late, but some of the messaging around it has been a little strange, and it's indicative of a slightly scrambled, who knows what's going on approach. Dom and I were talking before we came on about this play-in tournament, and I mean, no one really knows what it actually is. Is it a tournament where places are up for grabs? Is it a practice exercise for the guys who've already been picked? It isn't really that clear. And yeah, so my one concern is that there might be some slightly scrambled thinking going on behind closed doors, and that this close to the tournament, you should really have a pretty clear idea of the 15 names. I mean, I think they probably do. We've discussed it a lot privately, and I think we've said that, at least 12 or 13 seem to be locks. But yeah, it is strange. I think all of the major countries now have released their squads apart from us and Pakistan. Pakistan have released an 18 who they're going to play or take to England. But yeah, it's never a great boat to be in, is it? Sri Lanka and Pakistan do seem to be two of the more disorganized boards when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Disorganization, or part of a grand master plan to win the tournament?
70 chess, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's disorganization. That doesn't mean I don't think that they have some good plans, good ways where they can be competitive within this tournament. Part of me has been going through kind of the list of 15 players and all the different permutations, and also thinking about injuries. There is an injury cloud that I think is hanging over the head of SLC that they're trying to make sense of. We haven't heard anything about Dilshan Madhushanka since he was ruled out of the IPL. So who knows how he's going now. And I'd imagine he was one of their 4 paceys that they definitely were including. Manindu Hasaranga, he batted today but did not bowl. So I hope that means he's on the right track and recovering well. And then we really don't know about people like Angelo Matthews, who didn't bowl in the first match and then didn't play in the second match. So is there something up? We know Pathirana has a hamstring injury. So that's the thing that kind of makes me a little bit concerned that maybe they're not releasing the 15 because there are 3 or 4 injury question marks among players who would otherwise be dead certainties in the squad.
You see, I kind of do have a little bit of sympathy for SLC in this, and I think part of the reason why it feels a bit scrambled is because I kind of feel that ICC tournaments are coming around way too quickly now, and that actually you're not able to build up momentum and excitement. There's only so much excitement Sean Paul meeting Candapol can kind of generate, right? When it happens, it's happening way too frequently, and I think that's part of the problem, part of the reasoning why we're having to have these kind of weird tournaments, and Sri Lanka and Pakistan are, I'm going to say rightfully, looking to push back the date in which they need to announce their squad, because a month out seems actually quite a long time. Doesn't it? A lot can change in cricket. Players can come in and out of form 3 or 4 times in that period, right?
Yeah.
In T20 cricket, I just feel that some of the noises that we're hearing from it kind of make it sound like actually we all think within the Murali end, and I think I can speak for Estelle here when I say we think there's at least 11 names, possibly 12, possibly even 13, who are kind of sure bets for getting onto this flight to the USA. But the fact they've even done this and put this tournament on is, I just think, kind of quite strange. Unless what they haven't told us is actually we know who the squad is. We just want to have a look at some people in case they need to be called up for injuries. And also we want to play the lads who weren't in the IPL, which is all our batters, into some sort of form. Then if that's the reasoning, then it's not a bad one. We remember ahead of those tests in New Zealand, where if we'd won both of them, we would have got to the Test Championship final. They arranged, they created or recreated a cricket pitch up in, I think it was in Australia, and had the boys play practice games over there to kind of get used to conditions. If that's the kind of thing they're doing here, then kind of fair play to them. But if it is a case that actually there's only 7 or 8, let's say, players that are kind of sure definitely getting on those flights, and there's lots of places up for grabs, then I think that is not necessarily a great situation to be in at this point.
Yeah. Mark, I think it is preparation because, as Nick was saying, Pakistan is playing England. I think South Africa and West Indies are playing a series. IPL is going on. A lot of teams are, and Pakistan just played New Zealand. So a lot of teams have series in this 2-month span where we've been off. So I do think the preparation aspect is important. My understanding was they actually brought in the RPS ropes, 10 or 15 meters, to simulate a little bit more some of the shorter boundaries that they're going to be facing. So I agree with that. The question is, they haven't gone from 25 to 15, and we're seeing some of these performances, and we should probably talk about Bonica's performance, that are making us think, who's going to be part of the squad? All of a sudden, it looks like we have a depth of talent that we didn't have maybe, say, 3 months ago. A lot of interesting players who we might want to work into the squad or have near the squad.
Yeah, let's talk about. I mean, let's start off with Bonica, because he'll be the one generating the most kind of tweets, generating the most chat, because regardless of what you think about whether he's consistent or not, he's definitely a fan favourite, and he's definitely a player that's, he was instrumental in getting us to the Asia Cup final and winning it. And Nick, I know he's a player that you particularly enjoy watching. You kind of, in our WhatsApp group, you called exactly how this tournament was going to go for him, where he was going to have a couple of bad knocks and then one monster knock, and that'd be him in form. Is that what's happening here, Nick? And is he in your 11?
I'm still really on the fence with this. I totally accept that he's inconsistent, and he could, if you put him in the 11, he could very well get to the tournament, have a run of low scores and contribute nothing. But I mean, I kind of see it at the moment. I've got him as a Shanaka alternative, and if Shanaka isn't bowling much, then how reliable is he as a late innings hitter? So I think you can make a case for Barnaker, but I don't think that. Look, if he isn't picked, I'm not going to be up in arms about it, and I don't think anyone should be, because his body of work over the past 18 months has been pretty inconsistent, heading towards negligible. And I mean, I think there are still questions about the team balance, right? I mean, I know that we've said in the past that having Shanaka not bowling much and potentially batting at 8 isn't maximizing your resources necessarily, but then I wonder whether how much having that batting depth feeds into the way that guys above him can bat, and whether, I mean, if you don't have Shanaka at 8 and say you have Angelo and Shanaka 6 and 7, or Hasaranga and Angelo at 6 and 7, then it's quite a drop off to Chamira at 8, right? And that can get into the minds of everyone above, right from the first over through to the 14th, 15th over, of how hard can we go if we lose another 1 or 2 quick wickets and then suddenly we can't score runs at the back end of the innings. So for me, it's a really complicated issue, and I can see pros and cons on both sides of the debate, really.
Dom, if we go with the kind of general idea, and if you look at some of the other squads, that's what everyone else seems to think, that it's going to be slow turning pitches and we need lots of spinners. Is Shanaka, can we really justify playing Shanaka and Angelo in the same side? And is Shanaka the fall guy in all of this? And if that is the case, then do we have to talk about will it be a second spinning all rounder? So maybe a DDS. I thought Kamindu Mendes' place was assured, but now there's debate about whether that is the case or not. Is it Will Alagay? Is it, someone else who can bat a bit and bowl a bit?
Yeah, these are the big questions, right? I think if Sri Lanka is going to insist on playing 4 bowlers and 2 all-rounders, basically, then we have a lot of open questions, because I don't think on slow, low pitches, maybe you can make the argument that Angelo and Shanaka can cobble together 4 overs with their cutters, with their off-pace bowling, but I don't know if that's the best use of resources there. I wonder if you cannot get, on slow, low pitches, contributions from Charith and from Kamindu, and piece together a 5th bowler that way or a 6th bowler that way. I think the other question is, what is the place of someone like Sadira in the squad? Do they want him? Do they really want someone who's going to be an anchor and hold the innings together? Or are they just going to go hell for leather and try to score as much as they can? And if they get all out for 120, that's okay, because another day they'll score 220 or 230. I think those are kind of the decisions that need to be made. I think Banaka is an interesting factor, because I don't really know where he bats. I think Kamindu deserves a place in the top 3 because he's batted well there. He's tremendously talented. He can clear the boundary ropes. He can find the boundary. He can bowl a bit. And having that in your top 3 is really big. 5, 6, also kind of hard to shoehorn him in, because I don't think they're going to drop Charith. I think you could make the argument, but I don't think they're going to do that. And then if you drop someone like Angelo or Dawson, you're basically saying that one of the 2 of them either has to bowl for the full quota of overs, or potentially more than 2, and bowl in some tricky phases, or you're going to commit to playing 5 bowlers. So the math gets a little tricky there. Do you guys have a best 11 that if you had to pick right now, you would go with?
I've got my list. I'll give it to you guys.
Go on, Nick. Go on.
Hang on, let me just get my phone so I don't get this wrong. Well, I know the top 4. I would go Pathum, Kusal Mendes, Kamindu at 3, Charith at 4. Then I'd go 5, 6, 7. I would go Wanindu, Barnaker, Angelo. I'd have Chamira 8, Thikshana at 9, one of Tushar or Madhushankar at 10, and Pathirana at 11. But I see that there's a big drop off there from your top 7 to your number 8. And I guess Angelo, Banaka, Wanindu, 3 kind of boom or bust players potentially in your top 7 doesn't leave you with a lot of depth, and that team could end up getting skittled for like 120, 130 So I mean, yeah, that's my tentative 11, but I can see why people might totally disagree with it.
Mm.
So it's interesting, right? Because I think the IPL might influence the way teams approach batting. Definitely at the beginning of this tournament,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's and on top of that, I think the games being played in the USA are going to be interesting because they're kind of unknowns, right?
Yeah,
There's
Yep.
total.
there's no danger in a brand new drop and pitch, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I suspect definitely South Africa will be going for a all or nothing team, like
Yeah.
stacked full of. They're going to bat till about 7 or 8 with all big hitters. I kind of think that we need intent monsters. So kind of, I'm not sure if Sadira is the kind of person who
Mm-hmm.
is going to get us over the line in those big games. I'm also of the opinion that if you lose, you lose. It doesn't matter if you lose by 2 runs, 1 wicket, or 1,000 runs. If you're skilled out for 36, or if you're,
Right.
if you lose by 2 runs, a loss is a loss, right? You got to kind of. This could well be at the beginning of this tournament, at least. It could well be, go big or go home kind of thing, right? And I suspect that that's what we kind of might need to do, which is why I think I kind of like the kind of general makeup of the way Nick's team is.
Mm.
I also
And I'm
think that maybe if you take Dananjaya as a backup, which I think they could do, like in the same way that Windies have picked Roston Chase, like not necessarily the most explosive batter, but someone who covers options and bowls you pretty tidy spin, that then that might lessen the need for a Sadira because, I mean, DDS and
Mm-hmm.
Sadira can do kind of similar things batting, right? They could both bat across the spots in the top four. They're both really good fielders. Yeah, I don't know. So I wonder if I don't think I can see them picking both of those guys, and I can see the argument for leaning towards DDS over Sadira as a like several strings to his bow, even though I don't think that that would be any of our kind of first choice
Mm.
picks.
yeah,
So Nick, who are the other four filling out your 15 from that?
So I had 12, right? Because I had
Yeah.
Madhushankar and
Tushara
Chara I was
Madhushanka. Yeah.
undecided about. Uh, I guess we're looking at, I mean, you've got to have a backup spinner,
Mm-hmm.
who I guess is going to be Akila Dhananjaya. I don't think that would be who any of us would pick, but that looks like who it will be.
he's not the top wicket taker in the tournament, though, is he?
No,
No.
who was it, Dom? Thurinder Ratnayaka.
Surindu Ratnayaka.
And
Yep.
Nimish
Yep.
Vimukti's
And
taken
then
a fourth.
Nimesh Vimukti is second. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you had, I mean, like,
And we don't have an SLA. That's the other
yeah,
thing.
and
Yeah.
it seems like people think that slow left armers are going to be useful on these kind of pitches, right? Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, then you've got Will Alagay who bowled really well in the ILT20. I think that he's
Yeah.
probably like further down, and I can't see them pivoting towards Viaskanth this late, considering he hasn't played in the IPL. So yeah, those last three spots I think are really kind of pretty up for grabs. I'd say it would maybe be Aquila, DDS, and then I don't know who the last is. I had thought that Sadira was a lock for this squad, but maybe he's not.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I would assume that Dasson would actually be in the squad even if he's not in the 11. So that's
Yeah.
probably where I'd go with my 15.
That's pretty much what I have, more or less. So I have Kusal and Patham to open, Kamindu, Wainindu at that 4 or 5 floater position, Charith, and then I have Angelo and Dawson because I think I think BR is someone you can bring in if someone doesn't play well, right? Like he's good to have in your 15. And then I have Dikshana, Shamira, Dilshan Madhushanka / Nuantashara, depending on conditions, and then Mathisha Pathirana. I think you have a lot of bowling options in that lineup, a lot of places to go should things go. You have a slow, low turner. You have people who can bowl slowly, take advantage of the conditions. And then I've got Tushara, whoever the second spinner is going to be, which I agree with Nick. They're probably going to take Aquila, but I think Willa might be a better option for these particular conditions. And then Bonica and DDS are my other two backups there.
I mean, I know we said this last time, Rad, but the fact that DDS could do so many things, he could bat
Yeah.
basically at any position. Though obviously people have their opinion about where to bat to get optimum out of him, and he can bowl. I think just makes him kind of quite invaluable when you put a squad together, which is only 15 players, right? Which is just not that many people.
No.
I'll go.
Do you think? I was going to say, do you think there might be more chopping and changing in this tournament than there usually is? Because usually we stick with our 11. Whether there'll be more sort of horses for courses type things. Okay, we're playing in the Windies. It's a slow, low pitch. Let's play. Let's give Dilshan Madushanka a rest, and we'll play Will Alagay or whoever the second spinner happens to be.
In our golden era of T20 cricket, which is what 2011 till kind of 2014, we chopped and changed and it was horses for courses, right? And that was when we had our best squad ever.
Yeah.
So I don't see. I think that's got to be the way. That's what every other team does. I know as fans, we kind of think this is our strongest 11. I think we're gonna talk about the bowling and the IP and what our boys have been doing in the IPL in a bit. But if you look at that, I think that throws up a lot of questions as well, because some of the boys have gone to the IPL and not played at all. Some of them have gone there and been absolute breathing fire, and some of them are growing. It feels like they're growing game on game, right? So I think it's got to be horses for courses. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we just don't know what some of these pitches are going to do.
Yeah.
How different is New York going to be to Dallas? How different is Dallas going to be to Fort Lauderdale? And then when they go across to the Caribbean, every fixture should, in theory, is going to have different challenges. I think that has got to be the only way, right?
Yeah.
I also wonder if fielding comes into their thinking. We've talked about it ahead of the ODI World Cup that there are some less than average standard fielders in this team. And we saw Tushara drop a catch today. I do wonder whether they might think like Sadira and DDS, two of the better fielders in and around the squad, whether they're both worth taking and whether you can get them. I don't know. You can't get two subs on the park at the same time, can you?
No.
But yeah, I do wonder with the likes of if Tushara, Theeks, Angelo in the 11. I don't want to keep calling people out, but whether that comes into their mind at all.
Yeah, I wonder that too. Whether that adds in is another sort of positive for bringing Will Alagay, is that he's a good fielder, and Shanaka too, even if he's on the bench, is another person who can field quite capably. So Bonica can go knock around 90 and then need a fielding replacement in the second innings.
I wonder if Dustin gets in ahead of Bonica because he can feel better. Right, feel better and give you an over or two if you need it, right?
I guess now that you guys brought it up, if you're not going to start Bonica, you can't really keep him on the bench.
I can see that. I can see that you could make a strong argument for Dustin over Bonica by saying they're much of a muchness in terms of reliability as hitters, and Dustin offers a more rounded package.
Yeah.
Though the only thing I will say is I think the hitting is you come into form, you come out of form, right? You get over there, you start Dustin, you realise he's not scoring, you throw in Bonica, he starts scoring, and then
small boundaries would seem like Barnica's friend, right? And another left-handed option lower in the order. He didn't do much in the CPL last year, but he came in and made one. I think it was like 90 off 35 or something. There's a lot more to kind of talk about and think about than I think we assume there would be at this stage, right?
Yeah,
but it's a good I kind of think it's all good problems.
So it's in a positive way. I don't think any of it's kind of tear your hair out.
You say that. I suppose actually in the last 2 years since the last T20 World Cup, those spots, no one's kind of put their hand up and really grabbed it. I mean, we're kind of talking ourselves out of picking Sadira, but actually he's been given a spot in the team. He was given a role to do a certain thing. He's never not done that role it's kind of really harsh that we kind of go drop and bring in a pinch hitter, basically because Punjab Kings can score over 260 these days, right? So maybe we're the bad guys, like in all of this, and maybe we're not thinking about it right.
Yeah, strike rate agenda
I'm
uncles over here.
Yeah.
We're their gender uncles.
And
After
I
all
did
of
see
this.
Sadira made a 38 of 21 in this tournament. So I mean, if he's been asked to kind of bump the strike rate, you could say that he's done it.
Yeah. Which also makes you rethink some of the other things like Bonica's, 86 off of 35 or whatever it was, where it's like, okay, if Sadira can do that, what does that mean relatively? But yeah, these are good problems. I think Sadira again might make it in as a backup because of his fielding, right? He's a gun fielder. He's someone you can count on should someone in the top order lose form, things like that.
Should we move on and talk about, I'm going to say, the bowling / the IPL? So we're fresh off watching Tushar bowl for the Mumbai Indians. It seems to me like now he's coming to the side. I'm talking to about the Mumbai Indians here. He's coming to the team. He's getting a run of games. It feels to me like he's growing with confidence. They let him open the bowling today. I thought he was absolutely superb. He got really unlucky with an inside edge in the first over for Travis Head to get a boundary. Kind of the same thing happened in the second over. He would have, in the second over that he bowled, he would have finished his first spell on like no wickets, but conceded about 7 runs or something crazy like that. I think he ended up conceding 14 runs. So I think he's really grown leaps and bounds with the new ball right at the beginning, to the point where I kind of think he's almost getting into a position, when you consider the last game he played for Sri Lanka, he got a hat-trick, where you just cannot not start him at this point. I also think the man in the IPL this season, the second best bowler in the IPL, is Pathirana. We just can't not play him either, because he is breathing absolute fire. He's the ultimate death bowler. That should be kind of 8 good overs if those guys can kind of bring their form over. I also think Madhushanka is our player for the future. And actually, every time you've seen him at the international level, even when he's had moments when he's been hit around, he's always come back from that and been a handful for the bowlers. I kind of think he's got to play as well. I kind of think that means that Shamira is the one that doesn't start for me.
That's a good question, though.
Those are fit.
That's if all three are if they're gonna play 3 seamers. Yeah. They may not even play 3 seamers. Yeah. That's the other question. Yeah.
Where do you guys sit on this?
I'm
Dom.
Okay. Yeah, Nick, go for it. You go for it.
It's really hard because I think Pathirana is a lock. Assuming that he's fit, he has to play. I agree with you, Marky, that Tushar bowled really well up front today and in their last match where he took 3 wickets, but then he came back today and looked a lot worse at the back end, spraying it around a bit. There was a beamer. There were quite a few where the length was short. And I mean, I wonder if the thing that Shamira has working in his favour is that he's probably the one who's most comfortable bowling across all phases. Like, you can use him in the power play, you can use him in the middle overs, you can use him in the death, and that versatility might be really valuable. And as Dom says it, like, I think it depends if you play 2 or 3, because I think if you just go Tushar and Pathirana, you're having to use Tushar at the back end, which I don't think you want to do. I think the ideal thing to do with him would be to front load 3 overs of him in the power play. So, I mean, I wonder, I'm up in the air. I think I would go for Shamira, Pathirana, and one of Tushar and Madhushanka, and look to use them quite heavily up front. But I see you can make arguments all over the shop.
It's a hard decision to make. I think Pathirana is a lock. If they do not play him, that would be absolutely ridiculous. You can get 3 good death overs from him. Second best death bowler in the world, absolute must start. I think you need there to be swing for Madushanka and Tushar to be effective early. I think it's going to depend a little bit on the pitches. Um, I think if there is swing, you should probably play one of those two and pair him with Chimera early on. I wouldn't be surprised if they also go spin heavy, sort of matchup spin heavy early on if it's a slower, lower turning pitch. Um, so I think that's the other question: is what do we do in the opening overs? How do we want to structure them? Are we still going to be insistent on giving Angelo 2 overs in the power play? Because that makes things much more difficult to balance. It makes, if you have someone like Nuan Tashara, that means you can't play another seamer who's going to bowl early. You can't use Mahesh Deekshana in the power play. And so there's all sorts of options and questions. And I think it might have to be, because they have a plethora of bowling resources, what's going to make most sense when. Another thing we should point out is different times. So they're playing in the U.S. and the Windies at like 10 o'clock in the morning, right? So there's going to be more moisture in some of these pitches than there would be if it started later, and no dew either, which again, positive for Sri Lanka's spin attack. So I don't know how they're going to do it. I think they're just going to have to make a call at the beginning of every match what they want to do. I think you have 3 for sure starters. You've got Pathirana, Chimera, and Hasaranga. I wouldn't be surprised if they play with Deekshana spot a little bit. Given, Mark, you've kind of talked about this, he seems to have been figured out a little bit. And I think one of the strengths he used to have is that he bowled really well first up, and he was a great person to give a first over to. But if you're dead set on having Angelo bowl the first over, that means you have to move Deekshana around. And I think Deekshana is a little bit of a casualty of his competence. So he can bowl in all phases. He can do all sorts of things. So they move him around a lot rather than saying, okay, here's your role, bowl 1 over in the power play, 2 in the in the middle overs, and then 1 at the death. And I think how they want to use Deekshana is something they should probably consider a bit more, because he's an incredibly valuable bowler.
I'm interested to see, because I keep forgetting that we obviously open our bowling with Angelo Matthews. I kind of want to see Angelo Matthews bowling in tandem with Nuan Tishara against South Africa in New York, because I just think no one else in the world has ever thought about that. And if it works, it's genius.
I noticed LSG have been opening the bowling with Stoinis a bit, which is I'm sure that Sri Lanka inspired. It's an Angelo rip.
Yeah, the other inspiration, the other person who was inspired by it was Hardik as well, right? He himself from time to time, crazy. But actually, I kind of think there's something in it, because I still think Angelo buys you his wickets, and that's fine if he's doing it early up and if he gets the wickets. And I do kind of think, regardless of what the pitch is doing, early on in an innings, if you have that ball coming from you at a weird angle and a release point that you're not used to, I think it really can be a handful, and it continues to be a handful in the IPL. Even Travis Head was, kind of looked like he wasn't fluid early on with it. Then I just think you've got to give it a go, right? We just need to find a way. That's kind of I suppose the working ethos of Sri Lankan cricket, right? Find a way. Maybe it is Uncle Angelo and Nuan Tishara. I don't know. But
I wonder if that's maybe, finding a way is a good way of describing it. Like, they have 4 games to play, right, that they're guaranteed. They should come into that South Africa game with their ideal plan mocked up, right? They should know who's bowling when, how they're going to attack the different batters, what their approaches are going to be. They should leave no stone unturned for that match. And the same thing should be true of the Bangladesh match. Not that they shouldn't take the other games more seriously, but those are sort of the essential games to win. And they shouldn't come in without a very, very strong plan to take advantage of their strengths and the other team's weaknesses.
Exactly. Guys, should we leave it there? There'll be loads to talk about at some point this week, maybe next week, maybe when they're on the plane to America. A squad will be released, and absolutely 100 million% there'll be talking points when that squad's released, because A, there's always talking points when the squad is released, and B, this is Sri Lankan cricket, so absolutely anything can happen. When Dinesh Chandimal's name is on that list, we're going to have to jump back on here and have a chat about it, I feel.
Yeah, that's
An
an
emergency trendy podcast.
So yeah, let's try and get, as soon as that squad comes out, somebody, when I tweeted that we were expecting it last week and didn't come out, somebody said that squad isn't coming out till we get a flight to them on the plane to America. Then we haven't even talked about the fact that they took a photo with the US ambassador and Angela Matthews wasn't in it. Though I'm of the opinion he was taking the photo. And yeah, who knows what's going to happen in the next week in Sri Lankan cricket. It's a very long time. If you haven't already done so, sign up for the newsletter. We've been the Murali End. Back next week. Thanks for listening or watching. Bye.